She went to psychology and then eventually down the line decided that that wasn't for her because she just didn't want to deal with that world anymore. She really felt a yearning towards Torah, and she absolutely was that, you know, fire and everything related to teaching. It was shocking. I remember where I was when I got the call. When I was working, I was that year at TVA, and I was on my way back from a bus. I used to work 2 days a week at Chalva, and I was on my way back, and I got a call and basically said, you know, Ima has cancer. And then what happened was, very luckily, I was in Milluim, and we were in the Gush for 3 months. And one week they sent me and three friends to a random base to go and do guard duty. What am I going to do during those 7 days of 8 hours? Like, there's so much TV you can watch, there's so much Torah you can do. The NBA Finals was during that time. I told myself, what am I going to do? So I said, you know what? This is a great time to get this done. I gathered all my notes, and during that entire week of 8 hour, hours a day, I was editing my book, making changes, and doing everything. And by the end of that week, I actually had the entire book edited, both in English and in Hebrew.
Shalom Aleichem, and welcome to Startink. Startink is a podcast about the challenges and opportunities of being a mentor in the workforce. This week, we are joined by my very dear friend, Amech Tobin. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us, Amech.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Long-time listener.
So Amech and I go way, way back, and I do want to take this opportunity to publicly thank Amech for being a really good friend. I made Aliyah as a 13-year-old from Boston to Beit Shemesh, and he really took me under his wing and took care of me very well. So thank you for that, and we've been in touch ever since, and it's been very, very special. So Amech works in the tech world. We'll get into that a little bit later. He also does a lot of Miluim. He lives in Eretz Yisrael. He learns a lot and writes a lot and teaches a lot of Torah. So we're going to get into all that, and I'm really excited for this conversation. Before we jump in, a quick personal request to all of our listeners to please hit the subscribe button and leave a 5-star review. It really helps us grow the show. So Amech, let's start with your time in yeshiva. I remember we had a phone chavrusa, minchas chinuch on Motzei Shabbos while you were in yeshiva, and it was really a time where you were on a journey, you were learning a lot, you were growing a lot, you were trying to figure out what you wanted from your life. So maybe take us back to that tkufa. Tell us what you were learning in yeshiva, what you were thinking about, what you were trying to gain from those years, and what your various career paths were going forward.
Yeah, so if I'm actually going to start, like, I want to get to yeshiva, but I think it's really important for me to explain my context in yeshiva and just a bit about my history and how eventually I got to yeshiva to make all those, dreams and decisions in yeshiva come true and become the person I am. So I'll start a little bit back. My parents are both from the United States. My dad's from New York. Grew up in a conservative household, a very Zionistic, good classic American conservative home. We're talking about Judaism, conservatism, like that type of sector. And he did not grow up semi-frum, but he was always very, very connected to Eretz Yisrael. And my mother grew up in Chicago, and she was actually her great-grandfather was a rabbi named Rav David Regensburg. He actually was a big dayan in Chicago, and my grandparents told me that they actually asked him back in the day to be the chief rabbi of Ireland at a time back in the day. So my mother grew up in a more Bnei Akiva modern Orthodox world, and then they got married, and when they met in New York, and then they moved out to Florida. I was born in Florida, in Boca Raton, and we moved to Israel when I was around 4 years old. And my childhood was great. I kind of grew up in a very normal Beit Shemesh household. My parents, the beautiful thing about my parents was that they were kind of growing spiritually as I was growing up. Like, the people they are today was not the people they were growing up. And I think that's just a great thing generally for that in general, you want to be able to see your parents and see them grow as you are growing as well. And really gives you a lot of hashpah and, a lot of chizuk. And basically their entire concept was be a good, normal Pashut Yid who just loves Torah. I know we're going to get to, I'm sure we'll end up talking about my mother, but my mother eventually, she had a PhD in psychology, and then she kind of moved on to just teaching Torah, really, really a lot of Torah. All the Sefarim in our house are basically my mom's Sefarim, and she decided to quit the PhD and quit psychology and go full on into Tanakh and learning. She even started the Eshkolot program with Rabbi Shani Tarragon back in the day. So my house was basically filled in Torah. And then coming to that time to choose to where to go to yeshiva, I eventually chose to go to Yeshivat Ma'alot, which is where I wanted to be. I was actually the first one, I think, of my extended family to go to a regular Israeli classic Hesder yeshiva. And what happened was that I chose specifically Ma'alot because it was what I felt for me at the time was someone who, again, this is going to sound like saying something else, but the people I found similar people like me who had the same passion for Torah. And eventually that's what drew me into yeshiva, into Malot specifically, and basically growing in there. Back to your question, so the how I grew and the challenges and everything, and everything that eventually became who I am. That entire journey was a lot of self-discovery. I've always been more of a serious kid in the sense of like I take things when I do something I want to do it to the fullest, and I basically found in yeshiva during those years that I was able to focus a lot on the things that were important for me. Like, so I loved like other stuff like sports and whatever, and I still do to some degree. But when I immersed myself in yeshiva, I was able to kind of really find myself. I wasn't always, I went to Nativ Meir for high school, but I never like was really, I wasn't like the biggest learner back in the day. But then in yeshiva, I really found that calling. And obviously learning with you during those Motzei Shabbos was just part of that process of, trying to get guidance and learn from people who I thought at the time were a bit more advanced in their Torah learning or in what the amount of knowledge they had from this. And it just basically came into that place where I was learning a lot and really growing spiritually, finding the things that were really connecting to me. I was very much during that time in yeshiva, I found my love for all Torah Rav Kook and all the Hasidus world. And yeah, that's really what eventually that time was great for me and awesome. Yeah.
And then I remember that as you're immersing yourself in the learning, you weren't sure how that should translate to a next step, to a career. You were discussing shlichut at one point, or going to chinuch, if I recall. So tell me a little bit about that process.
Yeah, for sure. So I always had this dream to do shlichut. I've always been in the non-formal education system. I've always I've been in that. I grew up in yeshiva Ezra, but I always loved it, and I really thought that was a career path I wanted to do. I did eventually do some type of thing like that after yeshiva. So I finished Hesder, I did yeshiva, I did the army, I was a mocking Givati and whatever, and then I finished, and I decided if I was going to be doing shlichut or I was going to be going and then thinking about those next steps, going to shlichut or doing something else. I eventually decided that I thought the important thing for me was actually to go work in an American yeshiva, because that kind of combined a lot of non-formal education. I also wanted to get a job, so I wanted to be somewhat of a madrich, but at the same time still be connected to Torah and not being so far from Eretz Yisrael. I mean, at the time I was also dating and everything related to that. And that was my first thought. My first love was what you were exactly describing, wanting to be a Mechanech to some degree, just because I love teaching, I love giving over things. But then that doesn't exactly translate into my business career where I am now at the moment. But even what I do now semi-connects to that entire aspect of chinuch and giving over information and teaching. And kind of right now, I'm kind of doing the emunah bitachon like road. I'm going where God is kind of taking me to at the moment.
So let's just go back to those steps. So you left Hesder, you got a job as a madrich. Where was that job? And then what was sort of like the next stages where you realized that there had to be maybe a shift in mindset?
Yeah. So I worked at YTVA, which is TVA. At the time, it was just TVA. And then the first year that Rav Yair Eisenstack Halevi started the yeshiva, so they were basically looking for madrichim, and I was one of three. Me and two other friends. At the time, we weren't friends, but now they happen to be one of my closest friends. They're from Tuba. They signed Tuba, but we were madrichim there that first year, and it was a great year. It was mom's a great year. But I always knew that I wanted to go get a degree. Like I thought it was important because I mean, I come from an American background, and that's an important thing to do. And when I chose my degree, I was always thinking that the degree was going to be more of a broad degree. I wasn't always, the computer science guy or engineer type of guy. Like I wanted something a bit broader when I was looking for that. But in the back of my mind, I always knew that I wanted to open my options basically to anything. I liked chinuch and I liked non-formal chinuch, but I wanted to attain maybe another skill that I can get to eventually, if I need to pivot or even just where this can take me in the world, to have that in my back pocket. And everyone was telling me I had to get a degree, and my grandmother threatened me I had to get a degree. So that Jewish guilt is always there as well.
So what degree did you end up going for? And when did you transition to thinking of that as like a sort of back pocket, as you described it, to something a little more front and center?
Yeah, so I did a degree in something called logistics, economics, and management in Bar Ilan. I heard about it from my cousin who did the same degree, and essentially it was a business degree. That's what it was, a broad business degree, nothing specific. And as I was going, I got married in that first year of I mean, my whole marriage story is a whole different story by itself, but I got married that
Just
first
to
year.
not leave the listeners too much of a a
I can give
cliffhanger,
a
right? It was one of the first COVID weddings that was moved back to a Motzei Shabbos, and I was one of the first people to get the text message, "I'm sorry, but you're not invited to the wedding," and I was very, very hurt by that. But we'll get that another time, whatever. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah. That story is basically we were supposed to get married on Sunday and March 20th, and eventually 2020. And as we know, Motzei Shabbat, everything closed, so we got married at 1 o'clock in the morning at a shul, at a shul hall. No masks, just gloves, and we got married at 1 o'clock. No band, no food. Like, I mean, we did have food. We had licorice and mango bread, basically. And our yichud room was in the clot of the shul basement. And we were supposed to have a wedding of close to 400 people. And then we had to cut people down. We had family that came from America. So even though I wanted other people, right, you have to respect the wife and the family and her family that comes in. So we had to kind of allow them to come. But yeah, and then during that time, back to the story. So during that time in university, I basically was looking for a job because I just got married and it was important to support myself to some degree. So I dabbled in my second year in the university. A friend of mine, actually a mutual friend of ours, Jonathan Morgenstern, got me a job at Mas הכנסה. Basically, not the greatest place in the world. You're in charge of the taxes. We were in charge of Corona grants at the time. So you would just essentially decide if someone gets a Corona grant back in that day during COVID or not. But I always knew it was just also I wanted to maybe gain understanding a bit of how the accounting world works, but didn't like it. And then in my third year, my final degree of university, I just happened to stumble upon, I was looking for a job, something that would give me 4 days a week to work because I was in school only 1 day a week. And I basically kind of luckily just stumbled upon a job at a company called Hybap. And the only basically job they had available for me with someone with zero experience with a business degree was to come into their professional services team, which is basically onboarding and implementation of the product that they're using. And that's kind of what I've been at for the past 5 years in that realm of customer success. And it kind of just, it just fell the way it did. It was just looking for a job and it was the right time at the right place. So that's how I got to there.
And so, as you're getting more and more immersed in the business world, how is your Torah identity conforming to that schedule, lifestyle, mindset?
Yeah. So it for sure makes you decide to focus on what's important to you. It was very important for me to always daily learn something. Minimum would be Shai Mikra, just a minimum amount. But I always tried to add another element to whatever I can. There was a period of time where I was doing also Daf Yomi, and then just it was getting a bit hard and especially during the war when eventually that happened in 2023, there was also, hard to do that. But I always made sure to have some emunah type of book with me. And it was just about that balance. It was making sure that after shul or during shul, taking a few minutes to learn, finding those spare times in the evenings, and even during work once in a while when, as I heard a great shir by Rav Moshe Weinberger, you want to lachtof mitzvah. That essentially, any chance you have to lachtof a mitzvah, you try and do that. So that's where the balance was. I do miss the days of full stadarim, which I wasn't able to do, but always trying to balance that exact thing with the Torah and my free time when I can to make sure I'm doing something.
Mm-hmm. And your sort of early years of your career, especially the last 2.5. So you've been in and out of the army and Miluim, and I think it's important to publicly thank you and everybody else who's and the families, obviously, even more so, who have done that, and I have not for various reasons. But so I want to hear how that has been, sort of how you've developed your career, grown your career, thought about your career in light of the past war and Miluim in and out. Your wife has also just recently finished medical school, and Mazel Tov to you and to her and to the entire family on that, which is also a challenge. Just practically, it's a lot of time, and you have Baruch Hashem, some beautiful children to take care of. So, how have all of these challenges and conflicting priorities and goals of yours come together in these last couple of years?
Yeah, so you basically said the main word, which is it's absolutely a challenge. I think anyone who's going through this time understands the challenges. I would say the biggest challenge for me during this time, obviously, we're talking about like on face value, obviously being away from family and putting all the onus on your wife and she's in charge of everything. But I think the real challenge for me was that I did close to 300 days, maybe during the past 2 years, probably closer, yeah, almost to a full year of just Miluim in total. And that's also a full year of basically my professional growth not being there in terms of the job I do. I gained a lot of other skills and a lot of, very great memories and moments and real value things to my core identity as a human being and as a classic kid like Joe. But it was very hard to every time go and come back to work That was a real struggle, and not a lot of people understand that. People do understand it, but I don't think it's sunk into the psyche as much how the hard thing it is. Where, yeah, okay, so you went away for leave like 2 days, right? And if for 2 months, but you lost 2 months of work, and it's the back and forth and the back and forth, and it's absolutely been a challenge. But in the same time, I've really tried to grow myself with the skills I've gained from just perspective wise. I think the army and Milluim was giving me a big perspective on life. And that kind of has translated into work, just understanding where it is and what you do and how you deal with people. I work with customers. So just having that in the back of my mind and knowing like I'm doing like what I was doing was important. And now this is like another thing that's happening there for sure helps you in those soft skills. With my wife, also like she's like, there's no words that can describe how awesome she was during this time. She took basically I'm looking at her now, but she took she basically did all her med school during this war and she passed her boards and really like she's for sure the superstar in all this and she should be getting more of the recognition than I should. I mean, I did what everyone else did. I was in a pool with my Miluim friends and my yeshiva friends and we were all together and we had fun and my wife was here, defending the home and doing all that. So it's been an interesting time, but also as I keep on telling friends, Akash Baruch was going to repay us. So no, don't worry about that.
Right. And I guess the question that I've been thinking about a lot recently, and I'm wondering, between you and your colleagues and your friends, when you have such an intense experience, people literally putting their lives on their line, literally losing friends, going through injuries, which I should protect everyone and send refuah to everyone who needs,
Oh
it can
man.
really make the entire, tech buzz startup seed seem a little bit less meaningful, less important. So have you seen that shift when people around you sort of saying like, what does this all mean? Like, whereas maybe before the war, without that experience, people would invest so much emotional energy and just prioritize so much that aspect of their lives. Now it's like a lot less important. Do you see that?
You're referring to is the Miluim looking at less important or work is
People who
looking
have
at
done Miluim but are working in the tech world, are they like saying like, this isn't really so important anymore because like, screw it,
which the Miluim or the tech?
the tech?
The tech. I think it's very nuanced. I think for some people, yes, and for some people, no. I mean, for me, I kind of look at the tech world going back to that as real life. So, and Miluim is more of like an abstract thing that's happening, and therefore I would say that for me, I always try to get back to that tech life, meaning that stability and balance. Tech life essentially for me means home. That's what it means for me. And that means family and that means kids. It could be that for some other people, I absolutely know some other people who Dafka Miluim is a break from life. They kind of look at like life is kind of hard for them. And therefore they want to kind of run away from life and go to Miluim. They might not be married. That could be one aspect, or they kind of enjoy that camaraderie of what Milluim gives you because sometimes in work you can find the purpose, sometimes you lose sometimes the purpose of what work is. It becomes very like, what are you actually doing in this? Like, very rare the people who do something that, I mean, you do something important, but like that other people like that feel the purpose on a day-to-day basis. You find the purpose in the family and whatever it is you have. So basically for some people yes, for some people no. Me personally, I find that more life is in that world of tech because that's my balance in life.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're basically saying that your experience in the tech world is a piece and component to regular life. Regular life, that means davening in your shul and learning your Stein Mikra and being with your family. And so that bundle is what you're really hoping to get back to and hoping to always, return to after all the Miluim. And so it's not just like separate from the other things and like, oh, that's not important, this is important. It's all integrated.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I think you summarized that well.
Okay, so let's transition a little bit. I wanted to talk a little bit about your mother, Zichronah Livracha, a very special person, Dodi Tobin, Zichronah Livracha. Tell us a little bit about her. You alluded to before her pivot from psychology to the world of Torah. I know, especially in the Shiva and the Levaya, she had some very interesting perspectives on work and careers. So I wonder if you could share some of that with us as well.
Yeah, so my mother, as I mentioned a bit before, she was an oldest child, and so my oldest child. We were very very similar, but essentially she was always like the good kid of the family, and she went to psychology, and then eventually down the line decided that that wasn't for her because she just didn't want to deal with that world anymore. She really felt a yearning towards Torah, and she absolutely was that you know fire and everything related to teaching. She was a very good teacher, and everything she taught Mahon Nayat, she taught Narova, and she basically shaped the way we as a family kind of viewed what it means to be connected to Hashem. Her big thing was about not just doing mitzvah, like obviously that was super important, but it was about, do you have a relationship with Kadosh Baruch Hu? That essentially was her entire, I think, what her entire mission on the world was, to get people to understand that it's important not just to do things, but actually feel connection and a feeling towards being present with Kadosh Baruch Hu on a daily basis. I mean, maybe that's why I so much love emunah and bitachon. Her perspective on like work and life, or work and like Torah in general, was very much that like Torah is going to give you, is going to be your, let's say, those engines that will actually give you perspective on what the real world is. Meaning that everything is a lens of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's everything that you're viewing in this world should be through the lens of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That everything is part of God. And she, just from the books she had in the house, just from the way she spoke, and she was diagnosed with cancer. That absolutely, when that happened, that absolutely continued to grow. Even during the time when she was sick, she was very, very, very emunah and bitachon driven. She never complained. Like even during the 4 years of sickness, she very much was preaching belief in God and that there's a reason. And dafka during that time, her emunah and bitachon probably grew even bigger than what we were accustomed to on a daily basis.
Wow, it's really special to hear. And can you share some of her perspectives on sort of work-life balance, work and Torah relationship?
Yeah. Work-life balance and relationships. So she was very fortunate to be married to my dad, because her perspective on work-life balance was that work is important, but life is more important, meaning the things that actually matter to you and the things that are, work is just one part of your life. It's not the main thing that's important for you. There's this famous story that my dad always loves to tell, that like my dad's a lawyer and he had this crazy deal back in the States. I mean, we lived in Israel, but there was a deal going on in the States that he had to take a part of it. And my mom and they spoke before on Friday that they were going to do early Shabbos. And we were living in Israel, Beit Shemesh. And then at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, my dad got a call that that has to happen, and my dad has to be there at basically early Shabbos was at 6 o'clock, and this call was going to be at 6 o'clock. Therefore, it was an hour call, and my dad had to be in this call. And basically told my mom, and my mom flipped. And she said, basically, her entire thing was that the client can wait till Monday. Like no one's gonna, in her words, no one's gonna die, right? My dad eventually did do the call, right? But my mom was very upset. But I think that story basically shows you how much she thought, and she kept on preaching what you should really value, what is important in life, right? What really the core values of your Torah thing, and the other things, they're important and they probably take a big chunk of your day. For instance, us people who work in the workforce, we work 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day at regular work. But the means, that is part of life. And even that part is for the main reason, which is what your ultimate value is, which is family, Torah, and everything. So it was just a matter of, what, like a pyramid kind of, what was at top, and then everything else is some means to continue to get to that place where you're actually growing that top of the pyramid.
Mhm. And so can you take us through those, 4 years you mentioned? How old were you when she started to get sick? What was it like for you to go through the various stages of her illness from your perspective as as her oldest son and the sibling to younger siblings? To take us through a little bit that challenging period.
Yeah, I was 24 at the time. I
You were
was
24 when she
24.
passed away.
No, I was 24. I was 27 when she passed away. I was 23. You're right. I was 23 when she got diagnosed. I'm the oldest of four. My sister was young. I might be mistaking the ages. She got diagnosed in 2019. So how old was I in 2019? I'm 31 today. I was 22, 24, I think, right? I went to do a business degree. Math was not a strong suit of mine. I did 4 yechidot. That's fine. But yeah, it was shocking. I remember where I was when I got the call. When I was working, I was that year at TVA, and I was on my way back from a bus. I used to work 2 days a week at Chalva, and I was on my way back, and I got a call, and basically said, Ima has cancer, which is funny because a month before that, my dad, my mom, and myself and my sister, we flew to Uman, to like Ukraine, just to daven. And in hindsight, I understand why my mom was so, passionate about this trip. But yeah, it was tough. It was easy. She went through 2 stages of cancer. The first time she had it was 8 months, and then she was in remission for around a year and a half. But even that time, it wasn't like she was like, everything was good. And then eventually she got it back and passed away. So that entire period was around 4 years. Like, completely call it like the full package of the 4 years, even though part of it was in remission. But it was tough. It was my dad. My dad was the real hero of this. He was very much on top of everything and cared for my mom. His entire goal was, let me deal with this. You go live your life at the time, right? As much as you can. Like, don't, like, whatever you can, continue growing what you need to do. And we as siblings kind of stuck together and continued doing, and we're there all the time. But yeah, anyone passing away is very hard in any type of circumstance. I'm very grateful for the years I had and the years that we had left with her. But it was for sure challenging watching her, deteriorate as the years go on, and see who your mother was, and then, kind of become a shell of herself as the sickness got worse and worse. But it was really, the real thing that gave us was the everyone around us and the family and the help. So
Wow. And there was a period, I mean, a few weeks or a few months where like the end was really near. And I'm just curious from your perspective, like what does life look like when there's such a clear
yeah,
finish line?
yeah, that's such a great question, because like I have a very good friend who his father unfortunately passed away. Like, he was out on a run and he just passed away on the middle of the run, and he didn't have time to say goodbye. He didn't have time to get ready. So what? Yeah, I mean, also, I'm sure you understand this with the passing of your brother-in-law Ali Mo. Like, the same thing. Like, it just happens. You don't know it happens. We were actually called. We were called by the oncologist. The oncologist wanted to meet the four of us. I think I've told this story in public, but the oncologist came, asked to meet the four kids. So we came, and my uncle, who happened to be a family doctor who has also lost his parents for cancer, he actually was there also. And he sat with us. And basically, the oncologist told us a month and a half before she passed away, like, just so you know, like, this is it. Like, you have maybe a month, 2 months, 3 months. And I would say that when hearing those words, I think my life kind of, if you break down your life into different sections, that was for sure a new chapter in life. The second hearing your mother is about to pass away, basically understanding that as much as you want, the hope is you always will have hope, but that, there's nothing more you can do. So you try your best during that month and a half to cherish every moment, be a part of it, at the same time trying to balance your life. And yeah, it was very interesting to know that your mother is going to pass away and watch it happen in real time. It was for sure, it was a hard month and a half. And people were around us to be there to help us, to lift us. And yeah, eventually, that last morning, also just remembering my mother passed away around 11 o'clock, just remembering where I was, who I was driving with, and just like the night before, I vividly remember, this is like almost 4 years ago, what I was exactly doing the night before my mother passed away, what I was listening to, what, like the music I was listening to and everything. It's just a very cathartic, weird experience to see someone pass away in front of you, especially at such a young age, just 27. But I really believe everything, happens for a reason. Not everything is good, but levarach al hara k'shem levarach al tova. So that's the way I look at that whole thing.
It's really incredible how you and your family have had so much exuded so much strength and emunah and built yourselves up through the challenge and beyond the challenge. And there's so many things that have been done since in your mother's memory, so many wonderful initiatives. And one of them is sort of encapsulates this whole conversation, your journey, Torah and yeshiva and the army, is a sefer which you recently published. It's called Amech Dodi. People who are watching can see on my video here a really wonderful sefer. So tell us a little bit about the story of this sefer, how it came to be throughout the years, the Torah that you learned, you wrote, and you published throughout these different periods of your life, all coming together in this one piece.
Yeah, for sure. I just want to say, I maybe should have said this before. It's like a lot of people have gone through struggles like these also. I'm not anyone special or anything else. I'm just experiencing my story in that sense. But I also want to, you know, just continue telling like the other people who also go through this, how like, incredible and strong, and some people experience it differently. It's very hard as well. I mean, both of us have gone through struggles. So it's just important for me to emphasize that I'm not special in any type of way. It's the
I
normal
think you're
way of life.
special. I disagree, but whatever.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Well, I was nice to you in seventh grade. That's why you think I'm special. But yeah, so how did the Sefer come to be? So I when I came to yeshiva, there was this one rabbi, and he was a Chazer B'tshuva, and he wrote a book. And I was very, very inspired by this guy. It's like, it's so he wrote a book. Like, well, what does that mean? Who writes books, right? Only Gedolim, right? Only the Gaon of Vilna, and like people like who are really smart like write books. And as the years went on, I basically thought that I would want to eventually basically put my life's work into a piece eventually. And it kind of came by during yeshiva, during my times in yeshiva. I was, I think my shana off, I was asked to give a Dvar Torah. And I wrote a Dvar Torah, and I thought I gave it over well, but I liked the idea that from then on I would start writing Divrei Torah every week on Friday. While Friday in yeshiva is a fun day, ki'ilu, like people go and like go to whatever. I always make sure to spend. This was before ChatGPT, so we're talking about prep the shoot. I would sit 3 hours and basically write down a parsha thought, something just to have a Dvar Torah ready in my back pocket, so I can always, if needed to impress someone. Right, we're talking about maybe shidduchim or whatever, or my parents, just have this to impress, but obviously not. Like I wanted to write it for myself, but I wrote throughout the years, like just every week a Divrei Torah. And it's funny, when I was looking back at these Divrei Torah, I'm always missing like the parsha of Chukad and Balak and Pinchas, because that's always like Chodesh Sivan. So I never actually wrote those. I wrote every other parsha, but besides like those ones. So when I came to actually write the book, I eventually finished those as well. But what happened was I had all these Divrei Torah that I wrote throughout the years on my computer. And after my mother passed away, and I had a few other friends, personal friends from my community or from family friends who also wrote books, I said, this can actually be a reality. Maybe I should write a book as well regarding just all these Divrei Torah that I had. And what happened is that I started to really gain steam with doing this when my mother's second year retired, third year retired, where I was like, all right, now it's time to get serious about this. You had 1 year of Availus, so you didn't do anything. Then 1 year of war. Now it's like you're back to normal. And then what happened was, very luckily, I was in Miluim, and we were in the Gush for 3 months. And 1 week they sent me and 3 friends to a random base to go and do guard duty. Okay, essentially they just said there's this random base, and in the Gush, there's one emda there, right? And you're going to guard, 4 of you guys are going to guard there for a week. So usually when you hear there's an emda and you're guarding for 4 weeks, you're guarding there for a week, we'll do all right. 2 hours, you would do 2 hours, 6 hours off, right? Some people do 3 hours on, 9 hours off. We're all married guys who lived in Jerusalem and Carmel Gat. We're like, we're not doing this. We're doing 8 hours on, 20 hours, 24 hours off, so we can go home. So during those 8 hours, so I had a few days to plan. What am I going to do during those 7 days of 8 hour? Like, what am I going to do during those 8 hours? Like, there's so much TV you can watch. There's so much Torah you can do. I said to myself, right? I was like, the NBA finals was during that time. I told myself, what am I going to do? So I said, you know what? This is a great time to get this done. And I gathered all my notes. And during that entire week of 8 hour, hours a day, I was editing my book, making changes, and doing everything. And by the end of that week, I actually had the entire book edited, both in English and in Hebrew, according to those things. And it was important for me to do it in Hebrew. I mean, the original is Hebrew, and that's what Torah is, and then English, because I wanted my grandparents, and my mom was very big on everything she did in Hebrew. She translated to English for my grandparents. So I made sure to have it in English also. And yeah, after that, basically the process came to me that during that week, everything was edited. I made sure to go over. I had someone else review this, made, acknowledgments and dedication, and got a typesetter to eventually edit the entire book on the font type of level, and then found a publisher and basically published it. And a little bit ago, less than a year since that started, I eventually was able to Zocha to publish that book for myself, and it's on Amazon as well. But I made some copies, gave it to a bunch of different friends. The whole purpose was for a personal project, a dedication project, and eventually my dad also currently is raising money. They're actually building a Beit Midrash, my mother, for women in Beit Shemesh, for also one of my mom's dear friends who also passed away from cancer, also a teacher, Dr. Abigail Rock. And he's basically, so all the money that we can make from this book, whenever it happens, is going directly to that building fund. It's actually in the community you grew up in. It's across from the Ravens in Nofel Shemesh. That's where it's going to be. And it's like a Beit Midrash for women. And my dad keeps telling me, it's not for you. You are not going to be able to go learn there. He said women should be learning, because that was my mom's biggest thing. So that's essentially how the book became to be. And it's funny, I kind of look back at like some of the Divrei Torah I wrote in Shir Aleph, and I'm like, wow, I was a smart kid back then. Like, that's a really interesting point to look at this in this Divrei Torah time. And it's been a real blessing.
Amazing. It's really special to hear. And I do think that last point is actually a very profound one. And I think more people should actually think about it, guys who are listening to this in yeshiva, to really create some sort of tangible memory of what you're doing in yeshiva. And you can really like hold on to that. I think it's something very special. And the entire journey that you've described has really been inspiring and special. So thank you, Ami, for joining us. Thank you for sharing this. We'll include links to the book, to the Beit Midrash in the show notes if you send it to me afterwards. So we're going to go to our lightning round. 3 short questions, 3 hopefully short answers. We're in the summer. We have nice long Shabbos afternoons. What does Ami like to do at that time?
Right. I knew you were going to ask this, and I was like thinking of a joke, and I was going to be like, I'll tell them I don't keep Shabbos, and therefore, like, what am I going to say about that? But that's not true. I'm joking. I'm being sarcastic. I like to basically read and hang out with my wife, since during most of the week we are very busy, but that's what we like to do.
Amazing. And Parshat Shavua, there's this great Sefer called Amech Dodi by Dodi Tobin. But besides for that, what's your second favorite Sefer on the Parsha?
My second favorite parsha is Sefer is I love the Kedushat Levi. I'm a big Kedushat Levi guy. Always been a Berditchever. Berditchev Niggun was sung at my wedding as I was going up to the chuppah. It was the first real Sefer where parsha that I really immersed myself into.
Amazing. And finally, if you were forced to quit your job in the tech world, find something new, maybe something you dreamed of doing as a kid, what would that be?
Yeah, it would. There are two avenues here. It would either be teaching. I would love to do that, or it would be something related to sports, maybe sports analytics, or being a broadcaster, or anything related to that world. That would be for sure a dream.
Well, with that headset, you seem to be well on your way. You look great. Ami, thank you for joining us and wishing you and your family all the best and Hatzlacha Rabba.
Amen, amen. Thank you very much.